fans. My name is Nippy. So, you are wondering what is going on with Mistweavers in Shadowlands and why you should main this awesome healer. So, in this video we are going to take a look on Covenants, Soulbinds, Legendaries and builds for Mistweavers in PvE. We are also trying to predict where Mistweavers will land in the meta. I will be making these guides at least for both priest specs and holy paladins before launch, so don't hesitate to press that subscribe button and click the bell to get notified. I have included thumbnails down in the description below, so if you wanna skip to any section of this video, you can do so there. So, while leveling to new cap of 60, we gain a few new ranks to our existing spells. Most interesting one of these is the 58 level rank for Yulon, which makes this CD truly shine. On Mistweaver we get new ranks added to Dots of Death at level 52, Expel Harm gains a new rank at 54, Paralysis at level 56, and last, the most interesting one, as I mentioned earlier, 58 on our Celestial Summon Yulon or GG, if you opted into GG talent, which replaces Yulon. Most of these perks have little to no effect on our gameplay as Mistweaver, except for the 58 one on Yulon. So let's take a look what these perks are. So on 52 you gain Touch of Death, which increases your physical damage by 15% for 10 seconds after using Touch of Death. This is a not major thing to consider. 10 seconds every 3 minutes is a little underwhelming and has some synergy going on with the legendary Ancient Teachings of the Monastery, which seems to be the go-to legendary for Mythic Plus currently, but we'll talk about that more later on the video. So on 54 we gain Expel Harm, and what this does is it allows you to cast Expel Harm while channeling your Shooting Mist, and it will heal your Shooting Mist target also. Given how little we cast Shooting Mist and how low the Expel Harm heal is currently, this doesn't make you include Expel Harm into your rotation. So you can still pretty much ignore it. And on 56 we gain 15 seconds cooldown reduction on Paralysis, making it 30 seconds cooldown. So yeah, that's about it. Only upside on this is that we can interrupt casts with it more often in Mythic Plus environment, and more so this is a buff for PvP rather than PvE. So the big prize, Enveloping Breath on level 58. So while you have your Yulon or GG active, each of your Enveloping Mists cast will heal up to 6 nearby targets and increases all healing you do to them by 10%. So what this means is that most of the time with Yulon you want to pair your Mana Tea with the Yulon cast or Innervate if possible, so you don't delete your mana bar. Also, this will mix Enveloping Mist into your healing rotation more often, which is a good thing in my opinion. And so basically, point is to cast as many Enveloping Mists as possible during your Celestial windows and time the summons of your Celestial with heavy raid damage. If you are using GG, you need to make sure you to stay in the melee range, preferably play Kyrian and use Weapons of Order with GG for the mastery boost it provides, but we'll talk about that later too. Let's move on to the Covenants. So I'm gonna start this out with Kyrians, and if you pick Kyrian, you will gain Weapons of Order ability, which grants you 10% mastery buff and resets the cooldown of Essence Font. It also enhances your Essence Font to trigger instant heal to 6 allies when starting the channel and ending the channel of Essence Font. This is a great boost to GG if you opted into that talent, since GG does a lot of mastery healing. So my recommend for Covenant, if you are planning on playing mostly Mythic Plus in Shadowlands, is Kyrian for monks. Next up we have Summon Steward, which offers you a little bit of convenience and Feel of Serenity, which is an extra healing potion on separate cooldown from health stones and healing potions, with added mechanic of removing diseases, poisons, curses and bleeds on use. Bleed removal might be useful in the first trade tier, and I imagine you can cheese some dots off of yourself in Mythic Plus environment and later tiers also. But that's about it for Kyrians. So if you are going for Venture, you will gain Fallen Order, which opens up a mirror that summons various monk adepts every 3 seconds for 24 seconds that will cast Enveloping Mist, Breath of Fire and Fist of Fury on a 3-minute cooldown. There has been some bugs with this ability and not casting correct spells, but those should be fixed by now. You should be able to get most clones casting Enveloping Mists while spec'd into Mistweaver. This is a pretty much fire and forget CD, so personally I find it dull, but numerically it's doing alright both DPS and HPS wise, so if you want more passive option, go ahead, pick Venture, it's totally viable. Also, you will gain Door of Shadows, which was most hyped and talked about Covenant signature ability on the start of Alpha when we got data mined about these Covenant abilities. But I think this will end up pretty niche usage in form of skips you can do with it. WoW's patching code is so messy sometimes that this probably has little to no use, maybe some here and there. I also find it quite clunky to use casting this on a class that has so much mobility already, and the 1.5 second cast teleport is, well, you have transference, so you don't really need it. And besides that, I'm playing Void Elf, so I have a teleport already on my racial. But yeah, let's move on to the Night Fae. So as Night Fae, you will gain Phaelin Stomp, which places a Phaelin on the ground. And by the way, this is a gorgeous animation and does healing and damage on frontal cone. It does trigger an Essence Bolt to allies who got hit by it on 30 seconds cooldown. While you are fighting on the Phaelin, you have a 6% chance to reset the cooldown of the ability. So there's that. You might get lucky with those and can back-to-back spam this, but don't expect it to happen often. This is a solid choice healing-wise, and it's quite competitive with other Covenant abilities, but the positional requirements might be easier from time to time. Signature ability with Night Fae is Soul Shape, and yeah, it's 15-yard blink with 50% movement speed increase, and it sure feels nice, but it's not needed on a monk since we have so many mobility tools already. And yeah, it's a beautiful ability, and if you are into cosplaying Bluish Fox, it's a choice, and some added utility or mobility in this case. Next up we have my favorite, Necrolord, which grants you Pondushed Brew, and it's a 1 minute ground targeted cooldown, which gives anyone hit by the ability a 10 seconds buff to have 50% chance to replicate healing or damage you do to them on 35% effectiveness. Also, this increases your mastery healing on targets with the buff by 42%. This is a great choice numerically on healing side of things. Damage of this ability is not so great. And only downside I find with this is the positional requirement, and it might be hard to make most out of this ability if there's a lot of spreading on certain fights. And most of the damage in the first raid tier seems to be every 1 minute, so in that regard it syncs up nicely with that. As a Necrolord, you also gain Fleshcraft, which is a channeled ability which gives you a shield based on the channel time up to a cap of 20% of your max HP on 4-second channel, and it's empowered to 15% if you channel near a corpse. Well, this is not so great ability because you can't use it as a panic cooldown, but if you have some downtime in fights or before pull in Mythic Plus, you can pre-channel this or use it before you are starting to take damage on downtime when raiding. But that's about it, and we already have so much defensives as a monk. So, what are my recommendations for Covenants? Based on the current tuning, best picks for Covenants are Kyrian or Necrolord. Kyrian is a bit ahead on Mythic Plus, and Necrolord is a bit ahead for raiding. Venture and Nightfare are completely viable options too, and you are not shooting yourself into a leg for picking these either, so if you enjoy fairies or vampires, go ahead. And one thing to note is that if you enjoy playing multiple specs on Monk, I would recommend Kyrian. It has the best suited class ability for all of the 3 specs Monks have, and so it allows you to Windwalk and Brewmaster too. But as I said, they all have pros and cons, which you need to ponder on your own. Enjoyment of the game is much more important than 1% DPS increase if you are not a world first raider. Let's move on to the Soulbinds. As Kyrian Monk, you will mostly lean towards Kleia and Pelagos. Kleia offers Valiant Strikes, which is a great soul point to have even after today's nerfs, and 2 Potency Conduits with Strike with Clarity and Jade Bond. Strike with Clarity increases the duration of your weapons of order buff by 5 seconds and gives you a bit more mastery. You get this when you bind to Kleia as the first perk, and yeah. So Jade Bond Conduit reduces the cooldown of your Yulon or GG by 0.3 seconds every time you trigger your mastery healing, and it also buffs a bit your Yulon's shooting breeze. One thing to note is that between Renown ranks 21 to 28, I think Pelagos will be a better choice because you get 2 Potency Conduits slotted in on Renown 21, when Kleia requires you to have Renown 28 for 2 Potency Conduits. Another option is Pelagos, who has better Soulbinds with Let Go of the Past and Combat Meditation. If you have kept up with the Pelagos hype train, you probably know this already, but let's go over these. Let Go of the Past increases your mastery by 350 when you activate your Weapons of Order, which is the Kyrian class ability, and Combat Meditation is just a passive versatility boost with close to permanent uptime. At the start of the expansion, when Renown level is low, I would go with Kleia to unlock Valiant Strikes right away rather than combat meditation. These might have changed with the today's tuning on Cleia's Valiant Strikes, but I need to still test it out if this is the case. After reaching Renown rank 21, you should swap to Pelagos to be able to slot into Potency Conduits. Pelagos have the Let Go of the Past, which requires you to have level 30 Renown, so it takes some time to unlock the good trait for him. Next up we have Necrolord, so if you want to play Necrolord Monk, your only option realistically is picking Emeny as your Soulbind. Emeny allows you to unlock Lead by Example, which increases your primary stat by 5% and nearby allies by 2% for 10 seconds. So the intellect boost is on yourself the whole time Bonetrus crew is active on your group members. One thing to note also is that you can stack this bonus up to 15% based on... you can stack this bonus up to 15% primary stats based on the allies who got hit by Bonetrus crew. So basically this is a 15% intellect increase every minute for 10 seconds. You will be also able to slot in Bone Marrow Hops quickly with Emeny, which increases your Bonetrus crew's damage and healing by 40% and reduces its cooldown. Unfortunately, this Potency Conduit was recently nerfed and the cooldown reduction was capped to 2.5 seconds, but it's still a great conduit to have. So, as a Night Fae monk, you will mostly lean towards Dreamweaver on your Soulbind. You will gain Butt Tender right away, which is a poor man's cheat death effect. So basically after taking fatal damage, you will regenerate 30% of your max HP over 10 seconds, and if the seed is alive after 10 seconds, you will revive. This has 10 minutes cooldown and is a pretty lackluster ability, but we might see some niche usages if mechanics call for sacrificing players to soak something. I would actually skip the second Potency Conduit here and slot in only Jade Bond and pick the road in Soulbind tree to gain Empowered Chrysalis, which transfers 10% of your overhealing into shield on the target based on the caster's health. If you want to slot in a second Potency Conduit, you will need to pick Soothing Voice, which is useless in PvE content. However, if you are going this route, I would slot in Resplendent Mists or the Rising Sun Revival Conduit and skip the one affecting your Night Fae class ability because it only buffs the damage portion of Failing Stomp. So this might be useful in Mythic Plus to push more damage, but riding wise it doesn't help. One thing to note also is about Corian, which is a Night Fae Soulbind. She offers you Wild Hunt tactics right away, which increases your damage done to targets above 75% health and healing to targets below 35% HP. This is nothing special, but you might want to use this occasionally on Mythic Plus, especially where damage is more important. Because in general, in raids, first 25% of the damage is irrelevant. So, next up we have Venture, and they have more choices, and I actually think that all three Soulbinds have something interesting to offer, but I would lean towards General Draven or Tutor. General Draven is not offering anything special prior to Renown rank 31, and that's why it's a bit lackluster in the beginning until the Renown rank 31. Only thing basically you will gain with him is some free damage reduction. Theodore, on the other hand, offers you some power right away with Shooting Shade, which gives your abilities to chance to proc these two guys called Tupins and Cupins to your side every minute for 12 seconds and increases your mastery by 525 if you stand in the zone these guys leave behind. If you are going with Venture Monk, you want to slot in as your first potency conduit Imbued Reflections, which will make your Fallen Order monks summoned by your class ability to do more healing and damage by 36%. So, to recap, I would rank with current tuning the Covenants from best to worst as Necrolord, Kyrian, and Nightfare and Venture are quite even, but Necrolord and Kyrian are the best ones. Necrolord for raiding and Kyrian for Mythic Plus, but the difference is not a big. Let's move on to the legendaries. There is a lot of legendaries out there, but I will go over the ones you will be using probably with current tuning the most. There is, I think, 4 you might consider wearing, and the best one depends on the content you are doing. With the current tuning, best legendary to wear most of the time will be Tear of Morning. Tear of Morning makes your enveloping mists and Vivify casts on targets who have Renewing Mist on them to have 10% chance to spread Renewing Mist to another target. This also increases your Vivify's cleave healing portion to targets with Renewing Mist by 20%, and Enveloping Mists will also cleave into the targets with Renewing Mist on them for 20% of the original Enveloping Mist healing. This is an interesting legendary since this makes you want to cast more Enveloping Mists, and combining this with your Celestial Summon will make the cooldown even more stronger, since you will be casting a lot of Enveloping Mists during your GG or Yulon windows. This seems to be the strongest legendary currently. Next up on the list we have Ancient Teachings of the Monastery. This is your choice if you are into the fist weaving style of monk, and will be the best one to wear in Mythic Plus content in my opinion. What this does is after you cast Essence Font, your next, even if you cancel the cast mid-channel, your next Tiger Balm, Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick heal injured allies within 20 yards for 250% of the damage done. So the trigger spell for this is Essence Font. Basically you can keep this buff up permanently by casting Essence Font every 15 seconds. This has great synergy with Rising Mist's talent, but I don't see this one being used as the go-to legendary in raiding on first tier. Great option for Mythic Plus, where you will want to play Rising Mist all the time. Third on my list is Invoker's Delight, which is it's not Mistweaver specific, it's Monk class specific legendary. This legendary gives you large haste steroid 33% to be precise for 20 seconds after you summon your Celestial. This is a pretty straightforward legendary, allows you to spam even more of your mana bar with Yulon, so prepare to with this. It's decent, but the above ones are better from a healing standpoint currently. But if for some reason you need to buff your 3-minute cooldown even more, this is a solid choice on some fights, perhaps. One thing to note is that this seems to be one of the best legendaries for Windwalker, so if you are looking for a legendary that is in a good spot for more than one spec, this is your choice. Last but not least, we have Yulon's Whisper. this is quite boring legendary, in my opinion, and I'm pleased they nerf it from 250% spell power to 60% of spell power. What this does is that every time you use your Thunder Focus T, you will do frontal area of effect heal to 6 allies within 15 yards over 2 seconds. As said, this is boring, but free healing every 30 seconds with Thunder Focus T on a class that has issues a lot with mana. It's a solid choice if you are looking for more passive legendary. Next up, we have builds, and these will be largely the same they were in Battle of Azeroth. In raids, you do have the option to play Raising Mist or Upwelling. They are pretty similar in power. I have tested them both in beta, and Upwelling being the more easy one to pull off. Depending on the raid encounter, you will have a choice between Summon Jade Serpent statue and Refreshing Jadewind. General rule applies here. If you can hit 6 targets constantly with Jadewind, pick it. If you can't, pick a statue. One thing to note about the statue is that it got changed to a 8-second channel, so it's more of a hassle to use this one when you need to reapply the statue channel on your tank more often, and thus spending more global cooldowns to do so. One interesting note on first row of talents is Mist Trap, which might creep into the right healing scheme also, since we are more focused on casting enveloping mists, and I think that Tear of Morning legendary buffs even more Mist Trap, because we are casting a lot of enveloping mists. So, after all this, where will Mistweaver Monk stand in regard to ranking as a healer? With the current tuning, Mistweaver seems to be a strong throughput healer, and my prediction in its current state, we might see more of them in raids. We even might see some of them in World First raiding, but don't quote me on that. Addition of power increasing cooldown with Yulon is a great thing to have and helps us to sort out some of our weaknesses. The big outlier still stands in the healer meta, nevertheless, not having a damage reduction cooldown in our disposal, or any special utility for that matter. Mystic Touch is brought by Brewmasters basically to every group, so I don't count that. But we have no idea yet how much we need damage reductions on the first tier. And now I will be asking you a question. Do you remember Uldir? Remember seeing a lot of Holy Paladins or Restoration Shamans? Me either. Both of those healers had their precious devotion auras and Spirit Link totems back then too, but still guilds brought more healers without damage reductions, so Resto Druids and Mistweaver Monks. Mistweaver Monks were actually really great on some fights, for example Fetid the Devourer, where tanks got so much damage that basically you needed to have some strong spot healing. So damage reduction and healer DPS is not be all and end all in terms of viability. I think this community perception got twisted to new levels in Eternal Palace with fights like Ashvane and Ashara in mythic difficulty especially. It kinda makes my head hurt even to think of this. So if your raid leader is bitching to you about not playing the end of Battle of Azeroth beta healer, prove him or her wrong and meme weave away. After all, the bigger reason between kill and wipe for most of us is not the lack of damage reduction, rather being the one sitting between chair and the computer screen. So remember that. Next up I have coming a look into Holy Paladins, so stay tuned for that. If you have any feedback or questions, you can leave a comment down below and I will get back to you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and see you on the next video.